The heart monitor flatlined. Inside the pristine white walls of St. Helena Medical Center, the most advanced hospital in the country, billionaire Amelia Turner was pronounced beyond saving. 100 of the best doctors stood frozen, watching the line on the screen go still. But then, a janitor, a quiet man named Daniel Brooks, stepped into the room, and everything changed. The alarm screamed through the sterile white room as chaos erupted around Amelia Turner's motionless body. Nurses shouted codes, doctors scrambled, machines blinked and wailed, but her heart refused to beat. The billionaire who once commanded empires now lay powerless beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. The air smelled of antiseptic and fear. Every second stretched like eternity. Someone whispered, "We're losing her." Dr. Rivera's voice cracked through the tension. "Charge again, 300 joules." A burst of electricity jolted Amelia's body upward before it fell back, limp as a rag doll. The heart monitor stayed flat, a straight, merciless line. The room fell silent, except for the faint hum of machines. A nurse turned away, tears spilling beneath her mask. In that silence, hope seemed to die. Behind the glass window, a man in a faded blue janitor uniform froze in place. His mop leaned against the wall, forgotten, water pooling at his feet. His name was Daniel Brooks, just another invisible worker in the grand halls of the rich and powerful. He shouldn't have been there. He had no reason to be. But something deep, wordless, drew him toward that door. Inside, Dr. Rivera lowered his hands, his voice barely a whisper. Time of death? But before he could finish, Daniel pushed the door open. Heads turned sharply. "Sir, you can't be in here," a nurse yelled. Yet Daniel didn't stop. He took one hesitant step after another, eyes locked on the lifeless woman. The chaos around him blurred. All he could see was someone slipping away. He reached the bedside. Her hand, pale, cold, and still, rested against the white sheet. For a moment, Daniel hesitated. Who was he to touch her? A billionaire, a stranger. But then he remembered the night he lost his wife, how he wished someone had held her hand when he couldn't. His throat tightened. And without a word, he reached out and took Amelia's hand into his own. The room went still. No one breathed. Nurses exchanged confused looks, ready to pull him away. But before anyone could move, a faint sound broke the silence. Beep, beep. The monitor flickered, weak but alive. One heartbeat, then another. Gasps filled the room. Dr. Rivera stumbled back, eyes wide. What did you do?" Daniel looked at the screen, tears brimming in disbelief. "I didn't do anything," he said softly. "She just remembered how to come back." The doctor scrambled to check her vitals, stunned and speechless. The heart monitor began to steady, like a melody returning from silence. Amelia's chest rose slightly. Her lips trembled with the faintest breath of life. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. 100 experts couldn't save her, but a janitor's touch had brought her back. Daniel stood frozen, not out of pride, but out of awe. He didn't understand it, and he didn't need to. Somewhere between his broken heart and her dying one, something invisible had passed, something that no science could measure. As nurses rushed to stabilize her, Daniel quietly stepped back. His hand slipped away from hers, trembling. No one spoke. No one dared to. He turned toward the door, his face wet with tears. Just before leaving, he whispered, "Sometimes the heart doesn't need medicine. It just needs to be held." And then he was gone, leaving behind a room full of stunned silence and a heartbeat that refused to stop. The ICU was no longer a battlefield of noise. It was a stunned silence, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the monitor. Every doctor, every nurse stood frozen, unable to explain what they had just witnessed. Dr. Rivera leaned over Amelia, eyes scanning the screen again and again, as if afraid the miracle might vanish if he blinked. "Her vitals are rising," he whispered, disbelief cracking through his voice. "She's stabilizing." The room, moments ago filled with panic, now trembled with wonder. Then chaos returned, but a different kind. "Get an oxygen line ready, prepare IV fluids, check her pupils." Orders shot through the air as the medical team jumped into motion, desperate to make sense of what had happened. Cameras on the wall caught every second, the billionaire alive, the janitor standing beside her. Nurses glanced at Daniel, eyes wide, whispering behind their masks. He stood still, his hand slowly lowering, as if afraid that the letting go might take the miracle away. "Who are you?" Dr. Rivera demanded, spinning toward him. His voice carried more fear than anger. "You're not authorized to be in here." Daniel's lips parted, but the words came quietly. "I work here, the night janitor." The doctor blinked, unsure how to respond. Around them, the heart monitor continued its steady rhythm, proof that something impossible had just occurred. "You touched her hand, and her heart started again?" someone murmured. "That's insane." Security was called. 2 guards appeared at the door, unsure whether they were detaining a hero or a criminal. The nurse who had screamed for help earlier stepped forward, her voice trembling. "He didn't hurt her, he just held her hand." The guards hesitated, exchanging uncertain looks. Meanwhile, Amelia's breathing deepened, the color slowly returning to her face. Every eye in the room shifted back to her, awe mixing with fear. Science had failed, something else had intervened. Daniel could feel the weight of 100 stares pressing on him. He took a step back, lowering his head. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," he said softly. His voice carried that rare sincerity that disarmed even the coldest hearts. For a moment, Dr. Rivera didn't know what to say. He was a man of logic, a servant of medicine, and yet the evidence glowed right in front of him, pulsing on a screen that refused to lie. "You should leave," the doctor finally whispered, "before this becomes something bigger than it already is." Daniel nodded, his eyes flicking once more toward Amelia. Something in her face, even unconscious, looked peaceful now, as if her spirit recognized something familiar. The room was full of brilliance, yet none of their brilliance had done what one act of compassion had. The janitor turned and walked out slowly, his footsteps echoing against the sterile tiles, each one softer than the last. Behind him, voices filled the space. This doesn't make sense. Did he shock her somehow? No, it was just touch. Confusion blended with awe, fear with fascination. And somewhere among the whispers, someone said what everyone was secretly thinking. Maybe it wasn't science at all. Down the empty hallway, Daniel stopped for a moment. He leaned against the wall, breathing shakily. His hands still trembled, not from fear, but from something else, something unexplainable. He didn't feel like a hero, he just felt human. Back in the ICU, Amelia Turner, the woman the world thought untouchable, took another fragile breath, as if drawn back, not by medicine, by the warmth of a stranger who refused to walk away. The world outside St. Helena Hospital spun on, unaware that a miracle had just occurred inside its glass walls. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows, painting the sterile halls in soft gold. Nurses whispered in corners, doctors huddled in disbelief, and headlines were already forming in their minds. Billionaire revived after 100 doctors failed. But beyond the shock and gossip, there lingered something deeper, a quiet question that no one dared to voice. Who was that man? Amelia Turner had been a legend long before her accident. 35 years old, self-made billionaire, founder of Turner Technologies, and a name that meant power in every boardroom across America. But beneath the layers of success, she was just a woman, a lonely one. Her mansion was filled with art, but no laughter. Her calendar was full, but her heart was empty. In the eyes of the world, she had everything. In truth, she had forgotten what it meant to feel. Down the same corridors where Amelia once strode in designer heels, Daniel Brooks walked quietly each night, pushing a cleaning cart with a broken wheel. 32 years old, broad-shouldered, sunburned skin, eyes that carried 1,000 stories he never told. He wasn't supposed to work in a place like this, a hospital for the elite. But bills didn't care about dreams, and life didn't wait for fairness. Each paycheck went straight to rent, school supplies, and a small drawer labeled Lily's future. Lily, 8 years old, bright as a sunrise, her laughter echoing through their small apartment every morning before school. She was all Daniel had left of Emily, his late wife, the love of his life, the woman who taught him that kindness was a kind of faith. When Emily got sick 3 years ago, Daniel sold everything to save her. He begged, borrowed, prayed, but medicine had a price his love couldn't pay. The night she died, he made her a promise. I'll never stop helping people, even if I have nothing left to give. That promise was what led him to this hospital, mopping floors where millionaires fought for another chance at life. He watched them come and go, some leaving healed, others leaving behind silence. He never complained. He just worked, prayed, and went home to tuck Lily in. But sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, he'd pause by the ICU windows and whisper to himself, maybe kindness is still worth something. One evening, Amelia had passed him in the hallway, her perfume sharp and elegant. She didn't notice him, not really, but he noticed her. The sadness in her eyes was something he knew too well. It was the look of someone who had everything except peace. For a moment, he almost said hello, but what could a janitor possibly say to a woman like her? So he lowered his head and kept walking. Two strangers, existing in the same world, divided by everything except pain. And then came the night of the crash. The news hit like thunder. Amelia Turner's private helicopter had gone down near Lakewood Canyon. Emergency sirens, flashing lights, chaos. Daniel had been cleaning the West Wing when they rushed her in. He caught a glimpse, her face pale, streaked with blood, her body limp. He didn't know why, but his heart sank. He prayed under his breath, please let her make it. For days, the hospital buzzed like a storm. The best surgeons from across the country arrived. Every machine, every medicine, every hope was thrown at her broken body. But when the monitors failed and the doctors stepped back in silence, Daniel was there, standing in the hallway, watching the world give up on her. That was the night everything changed. That was the moment a man with nothing reached out and gave everything he had left, a heartbeat of compassion. And though the world would call it a miracle, Daniel never saw it that way. He didn't heal her with power or prayer or magic. He simply did what his wife would have done. He held on when everyone else let go. It started with rain. Heavy, silver sheets pouring over the city, blurring headlights and washing color from the streets. The sky hung low, gray and unkind, as if foreshadowing what was about to happen. That morning, Amelia Turner's schedule was full as always. A business meeting, a charity call, a flight to Boston. She moved through her world like clockwork, polished and precise. But even billionaires can't control fate. Somewhere above the clouds, her helicopter faltered. Somewhere between power and heaven, she fell. The crash made national news within minutes. Turner Technologies CEO critically injured in aviation accident. The footage was heartbreaking. Twisted metal, a stretch of forest, flashing red lights. Paramedics fought the storm to reach her. She was barely breathing when they pulled her from the wreck. Her pulse, faint. Her body, broken. She was rushed to St. Helena Medical Center, the very hospital her company had once donated millions to. Now, those same halls echoed with the sound of her own emergency. Doctors filled the corridors, their faces tight with focus and fear. Helicopters brought in specialists from across the country, neurologists, cardiologists, trauma surgeons. 100 of the nation's best minds gathered under one roof, determined to save the woman who had funded their research, their equipment, their careers. But despite all their brilliance, nothing worked. The injuries were too severe, the machines too helpless. Hope was slipping through their hands like sand. Meanwhile, 2 floors below, Daniel Brooks was cleaning room 212, empty for the night. He hummed softly to himself, the kind of tune a father sings to keep loneliness from getting too loud. Through the vents above, he could hear the faint echo of panic from the ICU. He didn't know who it was. He didn't know a billionaire's life was hanging in the balance. He just heard pain, the kind that sounds the same no matter who you are. He paused, closed his eyes, and whispered, "God, whoever that is, please help them." Hours later, on his way to clock out, Daniel walked past the ICU corridor. The lights were brighter there, almost blinding. Nurses ran from room to room, doctors barked orders, and in the middle of it all, a young nurse stood crying, her hands trembling. "Please," she sobbed, "we're losing her." The desperation in her voice pierced through him. He didn't think. He just moved, toward the room, toward the sound of breaking hearts. His badge didn't grant him access, but compassion doesn't need permission. Inside, chaos reigned. Machines screamed, people shouted, and a lifeless body lay surrounded by technology that could not save her. Amelia Turner. Daniel had seen her photo in magazines, a woman untouchable, unstoppable. Now she looked small, fragile, human. Something inside him broke. He shouldn't have been there, he knew that. But his heart, the same heart that once broke beside a dying hospital bed, wouldn't let him walk away. A nurse grabbed his arm. "Sir, you can't." But she stopped when she saw his eyes, full of something she couldn't name. He didn't push past her. He just whispered, "Let me try." Before she could protest, he was at Amelia's side. Her skin was cold, her face pale, her pulse gone. The doctors had already given up. The silence in the room felt like surrender. And then Daniel reached for her hand. That was the moment, the first spark that would soon shake the entire hospital. 1 second, nothing. The next, a sound. Soft, almost too faint to hear. Beep. Then another. The monitor flickered to life, and the room gasped as one. The woman the world believed lost had found her way back, not through science, not through wealth, but through the touch of a man who had nothing left except love. And though no one could explain it, every heart in that room knew something extraordinary had just begun. The days that followed were unlike anything St. Helena Hospital had ever seen. Reporters swarmed outside the glass doors, cameras flashing through the drivel. Headlines screamed across every screen. "Billionaire revived by janitor's touch." Doctors avoided the press, their voices heavy with confusion. The board of directors wanted silence, the media wanted answers, and the world wanted to believe. Inside the ICU, Amelia Turner breathed softly, her body still fragile, her story already turning into a legend. Daniel tried to ignore it all. He returned to work the next night as if nothing had happened, pushing his cart, mopping the floors, avoiding the curious eyes that followed him. Some whispered behind him in disbelief, others in awe. "He's the one," they said. "That's the man who brought her back." But Daniel didn't look up. He didn't feel like a savior. He felt exposed, misplaced, a janitor in a world suddenly shining too bright. He just wanted things to go back to quiet. But Amelia wouldn't let the silence stay. The moment she could speak again, she asked one thing: "Who was holding my hand?" Her voice was soft, still raw from the respirator, but her eyes were sharp. No one had the courage to answer at first. Finally, a nurse whispered, "Daniel Brooks. He works nights." Amelia repeated the name like a memory she hadn't lived yet. "Find him," she said. "I need to see him." The staff exchanged uncertain looks. How could a billionaire and a janitor belong in the same sentence? 2 days later, Daniel was cleaning the hospital garden when she found him. Amelia moved slowly, still in a pale blue gown, her blonde hair loosely tied back. For a moment, she just watched him, the man who'd stepped into chaos without fear. "You saved me," she said quietly. Daniel froze, unsure if he should bow, run, or simply disappear. "No, ma'am," he murmured. "I just did what anyone would have done." Amelia smiled sadly. Then why didn't anyone else? They sat together on a cold bench beneath the trembling oak tree. Daniel told her about Emily, his wife who died in a small-town hospital because he couldn't afford the right treatment. He spoke of the nights he'd prayed for one more heartbeat that never came. Amelia listened, her eyes glassy, realizing that for all her money, she had never truly understood loss. When he finished, there was no pity in her silence, only respect. She reached out and squeezed his hand, the same way he had once held hers. "I think," she whispered, "you saved more than my life that night." But outside those hospital walls, the world was growing restless. Some called it divine intervention, others a scandal. Did he tamper with the machines? Was it staged? The rumors spread like wildfire. The board grew nervous, fearing lawsuits or media backlash. Behind closed doors, executives whispered that Daniel's presence had become a liability. They wanted him gone. He didn't know it yet, but the same miracle that lifted Amelia's heart was about to threaten his own world. One night, as he clocked out, a hospital administrator stopped him. "Mr. Brooks, we'll need to review your actions from that evening," she said coldly. "Please be prepared for a hearing." Daniel nodded quietly, gripping his lunchbox. He'd seen this kind of power before, the kind that dressed its fear as authority. He went home, kissed Lily goodnight, and stared at the ceiling long after she fell asleep. He didn't regret holding that woman's hand, but he wondered if doing the right thing was about to cost him everything he had left. In her room upstairs, Amelia couldn't sleep either. She replayed the sound of his voice, the warmth of his words. For the first time in her life, she wanted to use her power not to build something new, but to protect something pure. She didn't yet know how, but one thing was certain: she would not let the world break the man who reminded her that miracles aren't made in labs, they're born in kindness. The morning of the hearing felt colder than usual, though the sun poured through the hospital glass like gold. Daniel sat in the waiting hall, hands clasped tightly, his uniform freshly washed but still worn at the seams. Around him, the whispers never stopped. "That's him. The janitor. They're saying he broke protocol." He stared at the floor, heart pounding, wishing he could be anywhere else, home with Lily, sweeping the porch, living quietly. But life, once again, had other plans for him. Inside the boardroom, the air was thick with formality and fear. Men in suits and women in crisp blazers sat around a long table, their faces serious, their eyes cold. "Mr. Brooks," one of them began, "on the night of Miss Turner's incident, you entered a restricted ICU room without authorization. You made direct contact with the patient during a medical emergency. Do you deny this?" Daniel shook his head. "No, sir." A pause. "Then you understand you violated hospital protocol and could face termination." The words hit like a hammer. But before anyone could continue, a soft voice came from the doorway. "Then you'll have to terminate me, too." Every head turned. There stood Amelia Turner, no longer in a gown, but in a pale gray suit, her hair falling over her shoulders, her presence commanding the room like quiet thunder. Gasps filled the air as she walked in, uninvited yet undeniable. Her eyes found Daniel's instantly, steady, defiant, grateful. "Because without this man," she continued, "you wouldn't have a living patient to discuss today." The chairman rose sharply. "Miss Turner, with all due respect—" "With all due respect," she cut in, "this man reminded me what medicine forgot, that healing begins with humanity." Her words carried through the room like wind through broken glass. 100 doctors gave up. He didn't. He didn't need machines or titles, just compassion. Silence fell like snow. The board members glanced at one another, unsure whether to argue or bow their heads. Amelia stepped closer to Daniel. "If you fire him," she said, voice trembling but firm, "I'll withdraw every dollar my foundation has donated to this hospital, and I'll make sure the world knows exactly why." The tension shattered. No one dared to respond. Daniel sat frozen, struggling to speak. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered. Amelia turned to him, her eyes softening. "Yes, I did, because people like you remind people like me what we've forgotten." Her voice cracked. "You didn't just bring me back, Daniel. You brought me home." For a moment, even the cold suits looked human again. Outside the boardroom, the hallway was silent. Daniel and Amelia walked side by side, neither saying a word. When they reached the window overlooking the hospital garden, Amelia stopped. "Do you believe in miracles?" she asked. Daniel smiled faintly. "I believe in kindness," he said. "That's close enough." She laughed softly, the kind of laugh that sounds like sunlight after too many storms. But beneath that laughter was something heavier. Amelia knew money could bend rules, but it couldn't change hearts. Daniel knew kindness could heal wounds, but it couldn't erase the scars. Still, for the first time, both felt seen. The billionaire who had everything, and the janitor who had nothing but love to give. The miracle that had saved her heart was now saving something deeper, their faith in what made life worth living. As they stood there, a nurse passed by, whispering to a colleague, "That's her, and the janitor who saved her." Amelia heard it, smiled faintly, and said, "They'll never understand, will they?" Daniel shook his head. "They don't have to." He looked out at the city below, sunlight reflecting off the glass. "Some things," he said quietly, "aren't meant to be understood, only felt." As their reflections blurred together on the window, it was clear. The miracle wasn't a single heartbeat coming back. It was two souls learning to live again. Months passed, and the seasons began to turn. The story of Amelia Turner and the janitor who saved her heart spread far beyond St. Helena Hospital. Some called it a miracle, others called it fate, but for the two of them, it became something quieter, something sacred. Amelia no longer lived in boardrooms or beneath blinding lights. She spent her mornings walking the hospital garden, the same one where Daniel used to sweep fallen leaves. The flowers bloomed brighter that spring, as if life itself had been rewritten. Daniel's world changed too. He no longer wore the janitor's uniform. Amelia had insisted he join her foundation, the Brooks Turner Initiative, a program dedicated to helping single parents and families who couldn't afford medical care. He hesitated at first, unsure he belonged beside someone like her. But Amelia only smiled and said, "You belong wherever there's kindness." And so he stayed. He worked not from pride, but from purpose, the kind his late wife Emily would have believed in. Lily loved visiting the new office, a bright space filled with laughter, children, and hope. She'd run up and hug Amelia every time she came by, calling her Miss Amelia, though lately she'd begun to call her Aunt Amy. For a woman who once thought love was weakness, Amelia found herself cherishing that tiny voice saying her name. Daniel watched them from a distance sometimes, heart full, knowing that in some strange way, they had all saved each other. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Amelia stood on a stage before a small crowd. Cameras rolled, microphones glinted, but her voice was soft and steady. "I once believed money could fix everything," she began. "But when my heart stopped, it wasn't science or wealth that brought me back. It was compassion, a hand that reached for mine when everyone else turned away." The audience fell silent. Beside her, Daniel stood quietly, holding Lily's hand. Amelia turned toward him. This man reminded me that miracles aren't made by power, they're made by love. And this foundation exists because of that truth. She smiled through tears. No one should ever lose someone because they can't afford to be healed. The crowd rose in applause, but for Daniel, the only sound that mattered was the laughter of his daughter echoing beside them, the sound of life continuing, stronger than loss. After the ceremony, they walked together to the garden where it all began. The air was golden, the sky painted in soft pinks and blues. Amelia looked at Daniel, her eyes reflecting the sunset. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to think miracles were rare." Daniel smiled, his gaze gentle. "Maybe they're not rare," he said. "Maybe we just stopped noticing them." She nodded, tears glimmering. "Then let's keep noticing." As the evening light faded, they stood there, the billionaire who once ruled the world and the janitor who reminded her what it meant to be human. Two lives from opposite worlds, now forever intertwined by one impossible moment of grace. Amelia reached for his hand again, the same hand that had once pulled her back from darkness, and whispered, "Thank you for giving me back my heartbeat." Daniel shook his head softly. "You already had it. I just helped you remember." In the end, it wasn't science that saved her. It wasn't money or fame. It was kindness, pure, quiet, and unmeasured. Because sometimes the smallest touch can wake the deepest part of us back to life. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and share it with someone you love.